Okay, welcome everyone to our Friday seminar. Today we have a very interesting and timely, exciting topic. We're going to get a briefing on the latest on the Columbia River Crossing Bridge design and the planning that's gone into it. We have with us today two speakers for the price of one. We have Nancy Boyd and from the state of Washington. We also have Frank Green, who's an engineer on the project. I will let them each introduce themselves. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Nancy.
Well, thank you, John. I'm really happy to be here. Again, my name is Nancy Boyd. I'm the new project director for the Columbia River Crossing Project. I've been in this position for about a week and a half now. Is that right, Frank? About a week and a half, so this is one of my very first presentations. So Frank's here to help keep me in line if I if I can't remember some of the details. But you know, I'm really excited about being in this role, and I'm really excited about being here at Portland State University. It's been about 2 decades since I've been on campus here. My husband went to grad school here in geology, so I am going to ask anyone else a geology student out here just so I can convey that to my husband. Nope? All right. Well, by way of introduction, I'm also a geologist. I'm a licensed engineering geologist in the state of Washington. I'm also a licensed professional engineer. And I've worked for the department for about 20 years. I started working on the Mount St. Helens, the last bit of the Mount St. Helens Road up to from about Spirit Lake up to the observatory at Johnston Ridge. That was a great time. Again, 20 years ago. Used to have keys to the monument. And, definitely a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. And I've had, feel really fortunate. I have had a great career with WashDOT. Done a lot of different things. I've done stints in planning. I've done both the geology and the engineering and a variety of different things. And I spent my first $1 billion plus project was the Tacoma HOV freeway expansion program in Tacoma in Pierce County a number of years ago. And then for the past few years, I've been fortunate. I've been the state's deputy state design engineer, and I've been working on, so it oversees design policy. I've been working on what has been really fun for me to work on, some kind of cutting edge policy, including climate change adaptation and sustainable transportation, livable communities type policy, and how we get from, you know, past practice in, you know, designing our roadways and looking ahead and how we can do better. And how we can integrate transportation more effectively with communities. So you know, that's my background from both a project implementation and a policy standpoint. And to me, this is the best possible project I could be working on, because this is, you know, this project is a 5-mile-long thing that connects 2 major urban centers, and it's just ripe for a lot of good work here over the next couple of years. So with that, I'm going to get into my presentation. Oh, actually, I'm not. Take one step back. I did want to get a sense of who's here in the room and what your field of interests are. So just by show of hands, and I'll repeat this for our web listeners so they have a sense of it too. So from the planning, urban planning standpoint, just raise your hands. I'll be able to maybe focus some of my talking to your area of interest. How about engineering? All right, right. And what about some other areas? Architecture, maybe? Great. Anyone want to throw out any other areas of interest that I could add?
Environmental science.
Environmental science. All right. How did I forget that? Here we are in our EIS. Okay. Anything else? All right. So it looks like for those our web viewers, looks like a fair amount of engineering, planning, and some architecture and environmental. And then I think we have some members of the public as well. So welcome to everybody. All right. So Frank, you know what? I'm going to juggle. So yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great. Frank here, our structural engineering manager. He's going to be, we may tag team this a little bit. So people here today, you might have a variety of levels of awareness already on this project. And so I'm going to touch on just a broad introduction into the project, just in case it's new to you. And I'll talk about how we got to this point in project development, both what the problems that we're trying to fix and what the solutions we see that may be ahead of us. and our recent work on the bridge type selection and how that fits into the overall project and how we're planning to move forward. And we'll have some time for questions at the end from both Frank and I. So this is a critical link in the I-5 corridor between Canada and Mexico. It's the West Coast's primary travel corridor and is especially critical for interstate and international commerce. The lift span that currently interrupts traffic is the only stop, or stop light, some say, between actually anywhere on I-5. The project has been identified as a national priority by the federal government, and both Washington and Oregon are supporting the project. It's unique in the country, and it's unique in the sense that it really integrates multiple modes. It's the bike and ped, it's the light rail. Yes, it is a freeway, and also takes care of marine traffic needs in a way that is unusual. And so there's lots of opportunity to do great work. So for the project area, we're about 7 miles, and Frank, you can point to where we are here. We're about 7 miles from the southern end of the project area. The project includes existing freeways, existing interchanges from about Delta Park to SR 500 up in Vancouver. So we'll zoom in a little bit more on the project area here. The green dots are the multiple interchanges. All right, so if you have sort of an interest in planning or transportation planning, you might be interested to know that these interchanges are spaced less than a mile apart. And if you know anything about traffic flow, actually if you drive the corridor in a car, you might get the sense that you put a lot of cars in that, and the friction of the cars moving in and weaving in and out is not ideal when you have that many closely spaced interchanges. One of the key aspects to the way this project has developed is there was a decision to keep all those interchanges in those places because the access to the local community was considered important. All right, so that led to some challenges in how you can address those traffic movements in a way that smooths the traffic flow, which is an existing bottleneck or multiple existing bottlenecks, but also try to keep the footprint as narrow as you can within the existing freeway corridor. So the Columbia River runs from east to west through here, and the yellow line, of course, is the MAX light rail system, which currently ends at the Expo Center. The existing bridges were built in 1917 and 1958. It's actually 2 separate bridges with 3 northbound lanes, 3 southbound lanes. And there's been a lot of, you look back in history, it's been almost 100 years since, well, it actually has been 100 years since planners were first thinking about how to move from a ferry crossing to something that would be freely travelable. Is that a word? That's not a word. And think about the mode changes since in the last 100 years and how they were planning for it. There was a streetcar, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Streetcar. They were planning for wagons pulled by horses. And there were some automobiles, but a lot lower speeds than we have these days. The second bridge was built in 1958. And things have changed quite a bit in the last 100 years. But even in the last 50 years, since the second bridge was built, we have a much better understanding of seismic risks than we did just a few decades ago. And that's thanks to some good work that my fellow geologists have done in the Pacific Rim area just in the last 20 or 30 years. And that's led to a lot better awareness of course, tsunami risk, as we all understand with the unfortunate things going on in Japan, but also risk to both the superstructure, from failure of the superstructure, but also liquefaction. That was really poorly understood. Soil liquefaction, poorly understood when both of these bridges were built. We now have a much better understanding of how to build foundations in a way that is more resilient during even severe earthquakes. But the existing foundations are not sufficient, and for a major corridor, this is it's actually a very significant risk, given what we know about the potential for earthquakes in this area. Safety. The Hayden Island on-ramp on northbound I-5 is the location of the highest crash rate in Oregon. And for this corridor, the crash rate is about twice as high as crashes in other similar urban areas. There's about 1 crash a day for the project, within the project area. I think we can do a little bit better than that from a safety standpoint. There's an issue with freight and freight mobility. That's moving goods by truck, and quite a bit happens through this corridor. And I asked specifically for the slide to be able to illustrate something that I didn't know coming into the project. You know, I've been kind of on this learning curve as well, as we all are, and trying to understand what the major issues are that we're trying to address. But let me explain what this is. BIA means Bridge Influence Area. And early on in planning, there was a study to try to figure out, you know, vehicles moving through the area, where were they coming from and to, and going to. And you have to have that understanding to be able to understand, you know, what the potential solutions might be. So what this says is the through trips, those coming from outside the project area and going outside the project area, either direction, that's about 25% of the traffic. And then the blue line that you see here, those are those entering from the north and then exiting within this project area, essentially, this bridge influence area, about 11%. About 40% enter from within and then exit south, so in the Portland area. That's about 40%. And a pretty significant number, about 25%, 24%, but about a quarter of the vehicles enter and exit within that area. So what it means is they're using the interstate as almost like a local arterial. And that's just an interesting piece of information. So what does that mean with respect to freight? Well, you know, right now we're experiencing about 4 to 6 hour peak period. Where delivery times are unreliable, not just because of the bridge lifts, but because of the traffic. We're expecting that within about 20 or 30 years, that peak period the peak congestion may spread to, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, is it about 14 hours a day it could be? Okay. So that's significant as well. If we're trying to be able to optimize and actually do good planning for the future, do good planning in a way that plans for this influx of 1 million or so people. We don't want to see sprawl and bad planning perpetuated over time. We need to be able to plan in a way that acknowledges that, you know, it's very likely we're going to see this influx. How can we make sure that, or how can we optimize, I guess you can never know for sure, but how can we optimize how we accommodate freight in a way that doesn't stifle that economic activity in the area. These are jobs for people, and also provide travel options for all of those people. In a time when, you know, fuel types may change, the vehicle types that we use may change, all of those things are likely to change in this next 100 years that we're planning this corridor for. So limited travel options. Right now, buses, the existing transit service right now is buses. They get stuck in the traffic. And by 2030, it's predicted that buses will be stuck in the traffic for twice as long as they are today. So if you're trying to encourage people to use transit, we need to do something other than just more stuck in traffic. So that's where the light rail comes in. And I think that folks here in Portland know all about light rail, so as an advantage. To me, it means choices. It means choices and how we can, we're not saying people have to use light rail, it's just how can we provide options for people as times change. This width of the pathway, has anyone here ever actually walked across the bridge? All right, so for those on the web, 4 people raised their hand. How was your experience? Was it a little difficult?
Walking and biking across the bridge.
Oh, you've biked too.
So scary.
Yeah, so we're looking at a slide right here, and it shows a person standing to the side while a biker is there. Yeah, it's really not conducive to bikes or pedestrians. And you know, for such a major connector between urban areas, I think we can do better than provide this. It is such a beautiful area that you know, it has the potential to really attract people from all over as a bike route, but also just as a tourist destination, frankly, where you could go out and take pictures of this historic river and the surrounding geographic area. But just from a logistical standpoint, right now 2 bikers can't pass each other. If you're a person in a wheelchair and you try to pass and you come across somebody else in a wheelchair, it's very difficult to pass, if not impossible, in many areas. So clearly, it doesn't meet our current ADA requirements. And just from a practical standpoint, it's certainly not encouraging of bike and pedestrian travel. Okay, so critical I-5 problems. What this slide is this is a summary of the basic purpose and need of the project. This is why we're doing the project. And sometimes when we talk about bridge type and all of those things, we get caught in the weeds about details, and sometimes we need to remind ourselves why we're doing this whole thing. And we do need to significantly talk about bridge type, and we'll get to that. But we're here because of those collisions. I talked about that, the congestion, the bottlenecks. It's not necessarily a capacity expansion. It's getting the bottlenecks out, and there's a couple of reasons why that's good, not just from a capacity standpoint, but also from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint. We have people idling longer than they need to, and to the extent that we can decrease that until the time when we have different fuel choices that don't emit greenhouse gases, that's a benefit as well. To provide different transit options. We have very limited transit options now. The issue with freight I touched on, bike ped, I think I've already touched on all of these. Okay, so for solutions, there's been quite a public process, and it goes back a long time, 10 years. So if you're students in transportation planning, know that when you have major projects, it takes a long time. And there's a good reason for it. When you're talking about spending $3+ billion of taxpayers' money, you want to make sure you're spending it on the right thing. And to do that, you need to be informed by the public and other stakeholders, and make sure that as you spend it, you're spending it wisely. We have spent quite a bit of money on this so far. Everyone's seen that number in the papers. It's $120 million. And again, stepping in as a new person, I ask all these same questions. It is a lot of money, but it's also in line with other projects of this magnitude. It's necessary not just from the planning purpose, from the planning side, just needing to have that outreach and community involvement and talking in that planning sort of context. But some of the other things that we're doing is trying to minimize risks when we actually build the project. So doing testing and soil testing and pile driving testing. Those things that we know are big dollar ticket items when we're actually in construction, and to the extent we can minimize those risks, that's some of the stuff that we're doing up front. I want to go back. Just one thing, and this is just a little point of information that I wasn't aware of until I came onto the project. But when you do projects, you start with all these ideas, and then you narrow them down. So they had 70 concepts at first. Then we had 12 alternatives, and we had 5 alternatives. And remember, this is for the whole corridor, about how we address those problems in the corridor. Down to, in 2008, a locally preferred alternative was selected. And what does that mean? That's for the whole corridor. It's to rebuild those interchanges so that you can smooth the traffic. It's to replace the existing bridges. It's to include light rail in the project to address the transit needs. So that is, when we talk about a locally preferred alternative, it's all those things wrapped into the project. All right, I think I just talked about this slide. Is there anything I'm missing on this one, Frank? The model? The bottom. Cost estimate, 3.2 to 3.6. Okay, so lots of questions on that one. How do we arrive at that number? Well, again, fairly early in the planning stage, how do we validate that number? We do that through best standard practice, actually cutting edge practice in some cases. But the idea is not just doing the engineer's estimates and having review, which is good standard practice, but we've adopted some validation techniques that Washington has developed through major projects in the Puget Sound area. That's called the cost estimate validation process. You bring in some experts to have some separate eyes to take a look at what your assumptions are. You consider risk, so there's a base a base estimate, and then you actually quantify some of the risks for the project as well. And so that's what that is. As soon as we hear from some direction on the bridge type, we will update that estimate. But I don't imagine, based on the information we have so far, that we should see a significant change in that. But our intention is, as soon as we have that information, that we're going to update the estimate. It's been, is that about a year old? Okay. So we're planning for that right now. What this picture is the composite deck truss bridge type that was recommended by an independent bridge panel, and also then recommended to the governors for their input. And so there's been a lot of question about this. And Frank, I think you're going to walk us through that process in a minute. My main point with showing this slide here is just to indicate that what this is as I'm going to let you talk about this in a minute, but it's 3 lanes in each direction, 3 through lanes, but it's 5 lanes in each direction total because of those closely spaced interchanges, with light rail down below on one bridge and bike and ped on the other bridge. That's the deck truss. And we're going to talk about that more, as I said. Let's see. Where we're also headed as a solution is expanded travel options. And I already touched on this. Bike travel will be safer. I want to talk about bike and ped travel on this slide too, just because I want to point out that there are parallel planning efforts in both Portland and Vancouver that are going on right now to provide bike and ped links. And what we're trying to do is plan this project in context with those other studies that are going on that will really make this movement over the water, basically really facilitate that bike and ped travel. And so this is not a picture of all those linkages, but it just shows that some of this work is going on for bike ped linkages here and also in Vancouver. All right, so this is the light rail. This shows the light rail. And we are currently working on concepts for light rail stations. This provides for the urban planners in the group and the architects in the group some opportunities from a station planning standpoint and really from an urban design standpoint as we transition from, and light rail is right at that transition point between the transportation mode and the community. So that's where you get that human scale design sort of thing, and that goes as well for the bike and ped facility as well. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're trying to view things like aesthetics and architecture from a very large scale, but also a human scale. And a lot of the interesting work on that is still ahead of us, because right now it's just up in a kind of planning concept. And our intent is over the next couple of years to take that from concept to reality and how we're going to instruct a contractor to build this facility. Did I miss anything on that? Okay. Okay, so what are we trying to do here? We're trying to support economic growth in a smart way. And again, we're trying to plan for the future and how we're going to create jobs, not just with the construction-related jobs, but to support what we hope will be a base for a strong economy in this entire area. Easing congestion, improving safety, protecting the environment. Oh, now I get to hand this over to Frank, who will talk about these independent reviews, including the bridge panel review, and then after that, we're going to answer some questions, right?
Okay. Thanks, Nancy. My name is Frank Green. As Nancy mentioned, I'm an engineer on the project. My current designation is the structure engineering manager. I've been on the project now for going on about 5 years. I was there, as Nancy mentioned, when there was 70 different ideas of how to cross the river and what transit modes could be, and how that kind of refined down to a locally preferred alternative in the 2008 timeframe. So as Nancy mentioned, I'm going to discuss some of the independent reviews and really some of the recent work that's gone on the project, really covering about the last year's worth of work as it relates to the project. In mid-2010, the governors for both states actually convened an independent review panel with several purposes, but some of the focus was to ask that review panel, which consisted of several experts, national experts in their field, to look at our project as far as, you know, the implementation plan, the planning that had been going on regarding how does a program as big as the corridor improvements we're proposing get implemented, and looking at what we're, you know, proposing with a lot of our stakeholders. To look at our financial plan, as Nancy mentioned, you know, it's a pretty big number for a project in this region. 3.2 to 3.6 in that latest estimate is you know, definitely one of if not the biggest infrastructure improvement projects that we've looked at in this region historically. And then also to look at some of the key performance measures that had been being addressed throughout the process, the public and working with the local agencies. That effort took place over the course of about a month and a half, 2 months. There was 3 or maybe it was 4 actual public hearing type sessions where we presented, we being the CRC and the local stakeholders and local agencies on part of the project, presented the project to the independent panel, presented them a lot of information, a lot of documentation, answered you know, a lot of their questions. They took input from public testimony. And in July of last year, they sent a report, their final report of findings to the governors of both states. Their report actually had about 30 recommendations that covered several topics. You know, developing a long-term governance structure between the local agencies and the project partners was one of their recommendations. Their recommendations did focus on, you know, needing to look at phasing for the project, meaning how do you know, sequence and build different packages for a big scale project that could take long term to build, you know, up to 5 or 7 years of a length of contract, things like that. Looked at the bridge type that we had been, you know, working on through the process, and said, you know, this bridge type and the use of the type you're proposing is you know, somewhat unique for not only, you know, this use in our local region here, but also our country. It was a bridge that had a function that was a little different than you know, previously used with that bridge type. And then also, you know, discussed, as you look at a lot of these things, work with your public stakeholders to identify and work with some of the ideas and concepts for the interchanges that Nancy mentioned. After you've done a lot of that, you know, we need to revise and redo the cost estimates and see what comes out of that. And so there was, like I said, quite a few recommendations from that group, and the governors and the states, the DOTs, accepted the recommendations and began developing the plan with our local agencies and internally to implement those recommendations as we move forward. One of the recommendations, as I mentioned, was to revisit the bridge type itself for the river crossing, and this is where, as Nancy had mentioned, you know, it kind of goes away from the big 5-mile corridor and starts to focus on the details of the river crossing, remembering that the recommendation for the locally preferred alternative was replacing the existing bridges with the new bridge, but didn't really get into structure type. And so this is kind of that next step from the locally preferred alternative to implementing a project. This bridge review panel was convened in late 2010, and I think it was October and November were their first meetings. There was 16 members on the panel, and that panel included several well-renowned engineering and a couple of, you know, renowned architects on that group as well. They met over the course of November through February and presented their final report in early February to the DOTs. That group was given, you know, I'm going to walk through the constraints for the bridge itself that you know, are really driving some of the things they've been looking at. That group was given, you know, the ability to try to push back on some of the constraints that the project has been working with for several years. One of the things that our project, and a lot of people always hear about when we're talking about a bridge type over the river, is the aviation as well as the river navigation constraints that a bridge has to fall within. And so this is a you know, very easy to understand chart, I'm sure, but I'll try to do my best to explain it right now. So throughout the process, this dark thick line that you see here, working with FAA and the Coast Guard throughout the years, that thicker line that you see on this graphic is the profile that we're proposing for a new bridge. That profile allows to remove the lift span that Nancy mentioned was the only stoplight on I-5 between Canada and Mexico, but it also does its best to stay out of the aviation surfaces that are right at the location of our bridge. There's 2 airports in close vicinity to the I-5 crossing. PDX is the surface you see that's kind of the highest point here. That's the surface that we shouldn't be building a bridge into, because in the event of one operation failure or one engine failure, that's where a plane might be expected to be as they're flying in. The surface for Pearson that you see here, which is actually a closer airport, it's obviously it's not the international airport, so it's smaller airplanes than you'd expect at PDX, is located here. And then this red line is the departure surface for Pearson. Working with the Coast Guard, the boat surveys we've done and the elevation we're trying to figure out for how high the profile needs to be to not require a lift span is in our planning. This kind of dashed line you see here, the smaller dashed line that's about right there, provides 95 feet of clearance above the existing river. And that'll be able to accommodate about 98% of the river navigation traffic that goes through there. The 2% that would require a higher amount of clearance than that are, in the time that we did our study, were construction cranes that were going up to the dams for construction work, or some recreational sailboats, but very few trips, as I mentioned. In the time that we did our study, we didn't have a lot of needing more than this 95 feet of clearance requirements. And so you can kind of see the envelope that the project has kind of used for the profile that you see, with the bottom dotted line being the depth of a structure that you're going to build, the top line, the top dash line being what we would call the dynamic envelope, which is trucks, cars, illumination for lighting, sign bridges, signs. That's kind of the above deck envelope that you would see with a bridge. Some of the other constraints to discuss, it's as Nancy mentioned, it's improving the interstate in a already developed location. And so this is a picture that's looking north from Marine Drive, which is located near the south end of the improvements that we're making. But it really shows you, Hayden Island, the I-5 interchange on Hayden Island is the only access to Hayden Island currently. And Hayden Island is developed. There's a development, a shopping development. There's hotel, dense, some residential, a lot of already developed property on Hayden Island itself. And then as you move into Vancouver, I'm jumping ahead here. There's the Columbia River, but there's also the North Portland Harbor. So there's really 2 bodies of water to cross with our improvements here. And so you can see the bridge, as you're looking into it, any planned improvements has to really go through something that's already currently developed. In Washington, it's a very similar situation. We have a Burlington Railroad, Burlington Northern Railroad, the Apple Tree Park, downtown Vancouver. Oh, sorry. I will.
Does anyone else know what the apple tree is?
I'll explain it.
It's actually very cool. But
so yeah, since I went over Apple Tree, it's a 4F property, but there's one single tree here that the history of that tree is hard to you can hear anyone from way back when the fort was first established. Someone planted it, and it's actually its history dates back into the 1800s, I believe. The tree itself, if you've ever been out there, actually has a chain link fence, or it's like a chain mesh fence around it. But it designates this entire area here as the 4F property, the park that is part of that. The land bridge that was constructed from the fort to cross over SR-14 and really tie to the waterfront actually also ties to that Apple Tree Park location. So it has close ties to the historic reserve. And then the historic reserve in downtown Vancouver itself, they're really right on the edge of the existing I-5 corridor. And so the purpose of showing the Hayden Island picture and the Vancouver picture is throughout construction, we know this is I-5. This is a main thoroughfare for all the stuff that Nancy mentioned before, all the freight, the transit, the vehicles that are going to work, coming home from work, things like that. So during construction, we know that we're going to maintain traffic on I-5, performance and use of I-5, but there's really tight constraints to try to build a new river crossing, to build or improve these interchanges. There's urban center for downtown Vancouver and a historic reserve really constraining trying to where you touch down, how you touch down. It'll become one of those things that the independent panel actually mentioned, trying to figure out phasing, looking at construction.
I wanted to point out something here. Where's the pointer thing? All right. This was something I didn't realize until I met with the head of the historic park here and the archaeologist. I have visited the historic reserve in the past, but it's been a while. And has anyone ever been out to see these places right here, this old town site? Just a few people. What that is that was a town. There were a lot of Native Americans that actually had homes here as a major trading center, and this is a significant constraint for any freeway, actually any building in the area, and it's significant because it's actually from a continental perspective. I'm not overstating it. There were Iroquois Indians here. There were Native Hawaiians that had a home here back in the Hudson Bay Company time. And what they're doing is trying to reconstruct those homes on site, on their original sites. But that's a whole area of history that I had not been aware of. But as far as our natural or national heritage, but just from the historic perspectives, it's such a significant site that we're trying to be very mindful of our impacts. Not just in that area, but in some other areas. There's so much history here that we're trying to minimize that and trying to work very closely with the Historic Reserve to make sure that we're dealing with those constraints and any required impacts in a very respectful way.
So I think I have a few more slides to get through, and then hopefully we'll open up for some questions. The bridge panel, in their final report in February, came out with several recommendations. The first recommendation was based on the risk inherent with the design that you had been discussing, the potential for cost increase because it is a unique use of a structure and a design, to discontinue any further planning or design on the open web box concept bridge that had been being developed. And the kind of the secondary part of that recommendation was to investigate and to look into developing one of the three bridge types that they had actually said could be more of a traditional type use for a river crossing like this. The three bridge types that they recommended were either a tight arch bridge, so you'd have an arch kind of running down the center of the bridge, a cable-stayed bridge that's supported by cables, or a deck truss option that is similar in its appearance to the bridge that had been worked on previously, but it's a little different in the engineering of the actual bridge itself. Interesting thing to note is that the tight arch and the cable-stayed bridges kind of use a one bridge approach to crossing the river. It'd be one single bridge that has the width for I-5, both northbound and southbound on one bridge, whereas the deck truss, it would likely be kind of what we'd call a two-bridge scenario. So there'd be a northbound bridge and a southbound bridge. All three of these options from that bridge panel were seen as viable options to move forward with. So after the bridge panel, the governors immediately received the draft report and accepted the recommendations. So they directed the DOTs to discontinue any work on the open web box, any further work, but also directed both ODOT and WSDOT to conduct an expedited review of the bridge panel report in the effort of trying to provide a draft recommendation to them regarding the bridge type to cross the river with. And so over the course of about a month, the DOTs brought in some expertise from our headquarter offices, both in Salem and Olympia, down to the office here at the CRC office in Vancouver, and really worked through the primary reasons to try to provide or try to get to a recommendation for the bridge types.
Hey, Frank, the idea with the DOT reviews was really from an implementation standpoint to make recommendations on the practicality of implementation. So what the impacts are. The bridge type, the bridge panel recommended just the bridge type for the river crossing. And so what the DOTs did was figure out how you connect that to the rest of the facility. And so it was really the added work. It wasn't really a review of the technical work of the panel. It was just how you would implement that work.
The direction from the governors was to actually, that expedited review should recommend to them the bridge that provided the most cost-effective alternative, was able to maintain the schedule the project has been moving toward for the last several years, best met with the local, public commitments that have been made throughout the process, through all the work with agencies. And so the DOTs actually, after doing that expedited review, received or provided a draft recommendation to the governors. The governors took that recommendation and went out to the public, and there was a series of listening sessions that were held to have the public come and tell us, between the bridges, which ones they liked, what they didn't like about some of them. And so we heard from a lot of people at those listening sessions. I think it was in the hundreds of people that showed up to give actual verbal testimony. We received written comments. We're still awaiting direction from the governors as far as the direction that the project will move forward in. And with that, I'll let Nancy kind of touch upon that. One thing I forgot to mention, I was going to do as soon as I came up here. There is a project fact sheet that is available. I'll pass them around when I sit down here. If you'd like to take one, go ahead. Also, we have a sign-in sheet that if you would like to get email correspondence or the mail-out correspondence that we provide on a regular basis, sign up and we can get that to you, and I'll send that around as well.
Okay, hopefully you'll do the clicker for me still, Frank. Thanks. So our next steps, here's our timeline. Incidentally, all of this information is available on our website, and so the most up-to-date information is available on the website too. Occasionally we adjust some of these things, although for this level it's unlikely to adjust, but this is the schedule we're working with. As you can see, there's a lot going on in 2011. We had that bridge type analysis. Then we're working toward a final EIS here that we hope to get a record of decision late in the year. And then as soon as we get that, then we start the property acquisition process. All right, so if you're students in transportation and project development, you'll know that there are three things that are always the things that are on your critical path for actually doing construction. You got to get that right away. You got to get those utilities cleared out, and you have to make sure that your environmental permits and other permits are lined up. But there's always those things that, from a very practical, on-the-ground standpoint, you have to have done. And property acquisition takes a long time because we're talking about things that people, it's their own, economic. It's the things that they own, where they live, their businesses. So you don't want to rush that. So we need to start that as soon as we can so that we can get under construction soon. Final design phase, one interesting and yet not too talked about yet fact is that we're going to deliver this, the bridge and the two interchanges in a what for some is a different sort of procurement methodology called design build. It's different from our design bid build, where we design fully and then bid the project and a contractor builds it. We're going to actually bring it to a certain level in design, which we're pretty darn close to, but there is some final work. And the big challenge for me in directing this project is to make sure that, especially from the architectural side of things, that we define those expectations in a way that gets us the product we want. There have been projects in the past that haven't done so good of a job in defining those elements, and they don't get the product they want in a design-build environment. What we're going to try to do is spend a lot of time talking with different folks that are interested in this. We're going to hire a team of architects who have been involved in this sort of delivery environment to help recommend the best practices that we can follow in delivering this. So that work is, that's a large amount of our work in the coming year or so. And then the soonest construction could begin, of course that depends on all of our financing falling into place, would be the end of 2013. That's the target that we're working under. You know, we're hoping to get this done to help support economic recovery in the area, also support all of those other needs that we already talked about. I think there's one more slide on what to expect. All right. We're in the process of reinvigorating our outreach program, making sure that we have advisory groups that can help inform the project, and that we're having good public dialogue. You know, if you think about project development, even the bridge type discussion, all this work up to now is all just kind of the backbone of the project. It's the basics. And it's all refinement. It's the refinement. It's how the finishing, if you're building a house, you know, the initial work that the analogy I've heard is the initial work that we've done so far is just deciding if you're going to have a ranch or you know, the basic structure of your house. All that architectural detail. Now, granted, you have different opportunities depending on bridge type for that architectural detail. But there still is good detail work to be had, no matter which bridge type. So we're looking forward to having that dialogue and making sure that we are engaging all the right folks that we need to. And so we're going to reorganize our staff as well as a project team and make sure that we have the right combination of folks to help inform that discussion. Is that my last one? All right. Yeah, I went a little long, so sorry. Sometimes I go off on tangents a little bit. So we're definitely here to help answer any questions you might have. Or did you want to say something before we do question and answer, John? No?
No. It's time to ask some questions. We've got time for several.
Sure, yeah.
And be sure to use the microphone on your desk if possible.
Okay. All right. I'll do this gentleman here and then the one in the back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I see the slide? Excuse me, I have a voice problem too.
Yeah. I'll repeat the question for the folks just in case.
Could I see the slide of the 3 bridge types again?
Okay, so we're putting the slide up on the 3 bridge types.
It struck me watching the envelope lines you had on the other one that both the cable stay and the tied arch would have problems with intrusion into that. It seemed to me the obvious bridge type that would be optimal for here hasn't been considered, and that would be a simple series of deck arches, which provides a necessary clearance and 0 intrusion into the flight zone. I'd like to, ask for comments about why that was not considered.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, Frank, if you're able to, or if we have to do some research.
Yeah, and the red light's on, so I think I can speak. Actually, we have gone through the process and had several bridge type studies that we've done. And when we looked at bridge types, we actually had a group of experts come in and look at every conceivable bridge type that could work across the river. Deck arch was one of them, and with the, like you noted, the very constrained section to get through there, the deck arch actually was limiting the width that we could provide for the river navigation. And so what I should have been more clear with, the 95 is the vertical limit that we've been working with the Coast Guard. We've also been trying to provide a 300-foot window. That's that 95 feet clearance when we're working with them. And we found with the deck arch, which is, it's a lot like the arch that you see in this picture here, but the arch is below the deck. It ran into some complications with trying to provide that navigation.
Is it in those corners? Is it arches up?
We'll probably have to replace the lift span on the railway bridge for a deck arch to work. And
Because of how the river navigation is?
Exactly. They had to. That's a problem. That railway bridge is really a super problem for navigation and I think for the railway too. It's a 100-year-old bridge too.
Yeah. Okay, so for those who might have been on the webcast, the gentleman was just pointing out that the railroad bridge is also a problem, and that there's a navigational issue with navigating both bridges, I think is what, if I could summarize. All right, thank you for your question. Person in the back.
All right. So I know that in urban areas, freight traffic causes a lot of congestion. And so had you guys thrown around an idea about possibly building a specific truck highway to kind of bypass any of this and then maybe go back and just do seismic improvements to the current bridge? Because, I mean, if you take out that freight traffic, you probably ease congestion, you know, a little bit at least.
Well,
I mean, I know it would. I know it's probably not feasible because there's really not a lot of area to put another bridge across the Columbia. But I just wondered if that was any idea.
So I'll answer it generally, and then specific to your question, I'll ask Frank to maybe weigh in. What I know of the planning process was that there were lots of different options considered to begin with. I don't know if that one was. I'll let Frank weigh in. But you know, remember what problems are being addressed here. So it's not just the freight, it's not just the seismic, it's not just the issue of transit choices and safety. It's all of those things together. And so that's the sort of thing is they were trying to put together a viable transportation project in this area that would address all of those things that they were evaluating all the options against. And so clearly, you know, your idea perhaps could take, you know, would help the freight. It might help with the seismic if you did that upgrade, but it may, not knowing what they actually already evaluated, may not address all of them. That's just a quick answer. But
You could also cut down costs a lot.
yeah, and and before I give it to Frank, just remember the other thing, and this is the perpetual question in transportation planning, and is that there are so many needs. And you know, there's always a tendency to have a project that has, you know, it seems to get some momentum. How do you want to be able to take care of as many needs as you can? So this is taking care of what was determined to be the priority needs for the area based on the two planning entities. It's also taking care of some of the local needs that aren't really the interstate, just by nature of how it connects to the community. But it doesn't, we don't really claim to be solving everything.
Yeah, and just to add, Nancy hit a lot of the things that we found as we looked at it. But when Nancy mentioned and when I mentioned the 70 alternatives that were initially thought of in the planning phase, you know, how we come to that is that included a variety of different things, and 23 of those options that were looked at was not bridge type, but ways to cross the river with a planned I-5 improvement. And so that was a corridor that was out by the ports of Vancouver and Port of Vancouver, or Port of Portland, or you know, a crossing in Gresham and 192nd. So it looked at crossings in several different ways. It looked at tunnels. It looked at just supplementing and not replacing fully. And so options similar to what you brought up were looked at. And as Nancy had mentioned, as far as the purpose and need went with trying to measure them against the six congestion, safety, mobility, freight, earthquake safety, and bike ped, it didn't meet all of them. And so those ideas that couldn't meet all of them to improve the overall whole project weren't moved forward.
Let's see. I'll go to the woman in the back, and then the man in the black, and then black and back. Okay.
In terms of putting a bike ped route in such close proximity to a freeway, have you done air quality projections?
I don't know. I think we have looked at that because it's a factor in how you place the path.
Right.
And I'm going to let Frank answer the specifics. But what I know of it is that it has been a factor in where you might preferably do it. And Frank?
Yeah, and we have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee that has, throughout the process, we've worked with them. You know, the path has been in various places of planning. You know, is it in between like 205? Is it at the same level? Is it, you know, kind of in using the inside of the bridges we're currently looking at? We've done noise studies, air quality studies. We've done a lot of work working with that committee to try to optimize the bicycle and pedestrian, not only crossing but connections as well. And so there have been a lot of those issues looked at throughout the process.
Yes.
You said that you envision a modified type of design-build contract for this project. Do you envision throughout the development process to get to bridging documents being one thing? Would the end result be one contractor for the $3 billion project?
So we're envisioning an an initial phase that would be the bridge plus interchange work on either end, and we're still sizing all how that connects into as an initial phase. And that's the one that I'm referring to that will be design build. And then we're in the process right now of identifying preferred procurement methods for the remainders that will also match our cash flow. And so we're doing that work right now. We're doing that in conjunction with the finance planning that's happening. And so you might have seen some of that in the papers. There's a lot of work that's been done already in a finance plan. It's actually, just coming into it, it's probably the best plan I can think of in how you put the pieces together, because it's an incredible deal for all the different pieces. It's not fully paid for by tolls, not fully paid for by the feds, or the states don't have to bear it all. It's about as good as a balance as you can get. But that's what we'll be doing at the same time as planning out how we're going to deliver all the pieces in conjunction with the financing.
The decision has been made that the main crossing will be design build?
Yes, that decision has been made.
Does that include the South Channel too?
The South Channel, so we'd have to, the North Portland Harbor, we're not replacing that structure. And then what we're trying to do is work out when we're building all the other pieces as it connects right in there.
Yeah, the main line North Portland Harbor Bridge, as Nancy mentioned, is not being replaced, but there are several new structures over North Portland Harbor, and that's where some of them may be part of that initial package that's put out there, and maybe one or two of them are may not be.
And we do anticipate overlap. It's not going to be just consecutive, but we're just mapping all that out right now. Yes, sir.
More question.
Okay. All right. Gentleman in the back.
Have you, as far as tolling goes, if it's implemented, the stakeholders on Hayden Island, like the shopping mall and that, have you talked to them about a potential loss of value of land because it could deter people from going over the bridge to their location?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. So the question was, have we talked, I don't know if you had a microphone back there, have we talked with the people on Hayden Island about whether, that they expect to see decreased business traffic as a result of the tolling? Okay, I don't know. Did you know, Frank?
So there has been a lot of work with the the city of Portland and the local businesses on the island about what the interchange improvements can be to directly benefit them. I think the interchange we're looking to improve safety and ability to get to the island with will help them. The tolling question comes into play. I think it's definitely a concern they've raised, and I don't know that there's programs or incentives that have, we're not at that level.
But I can add a little bit to that, though. That tolling is not being proposed just as a finance tool. It's being proposed also as a traffic management. So it's active traffic management. And so congestion pricing. And, you can look at it another way, too, that if there are people that are avoiding the area because of congestion now, they may be willing to pay a toll if they can reliably know that they can go get it across during those peak periods. They would have to pay a toll, but at least the travel would be a little bit more reliable than it is now. So I think there's pluses and minuses. Like I said, I don't know if we've specifically had those conversations, but I know that that's part of the strategy, and really part of the strategy from a very holistic sense of how we want to balance the modes of travel and provide options is really through that congestion pricing tolling structure. Okay, well, I think that's it for now, but I just wanted to direct you to our website for any questions. We have a staff full of people very knowledgeable, and like I said, we're revamping and reinvigorating our public process, so hope to see you all again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Great presentation on a very important topic. Any students in the class who did not get a chance to ask a question, please submit your handwritten questions to me. And I want to put in a plug for next week's presentation. Next week, this is a recent addition to the agenda, we have Jimmy Kagan from the Institute for Natural Resources, and the seminar topic is road ecology.